They called her Prisoner 87B. No one asked for her name. No one cared. She was human, and to the Korthale Empire, that meant less than nothing. Humanity had lost a war in less than 8 cycles. Their fleets were disintegrated, their colonies glassed. Survivors were classified, sorted, and redistributed as labor assets. Mara Ellison, once a decorated field medic, became another captured number ship to Korthale Prime. Her fate, like most humans, was meant to be slow decay in the work pits. But fate had other ideas. An alien medic noticed her tending to an injured prisoner during transport. She had nothing, no supplies, no tools, but used strips of her own uniform to stop the bleeding. The alien, intrigued by her efficiency and precision, flagged her file. When the higher command reviewed her records, they saw her credentials in trauma care and triage. It earned her a reprieve from the mines, but not freedom. Instead, she was sent to the medical cast's lowest tier, stationed in the Empire's terminal ward, a place where soldiers too broken to be useful were sent to die quietly. Her job was simple: administer pain blockers and clean up the dead. No heroism, no medicine, just sanitation dressed as care. She was given no respect, no proper equipment, no translators. The Korthale believed in sterile procedure, mechanical detachment, and emotionless observation. Healing to them was mathematical. If the numbers didn't add up, the patient was discarded. Mara didn't follow their math. She talked to her patients. She held their hands. She hummed earth lullabies while applying bandages made from recycled fabric. When a soldier convulsed in pain, she didn't just inject sedatives. She whispered him, calmed him until the tremors stopped. Her methods were viewed as primitive, even disruptive. But then something happened to Korthale couldn't ignore. The patients under her care didn't die. At first, it was dismissed as chance. Perhaps the injuries weren't fatal. Maybe someone mislabeled their condition. But patterns emerged. Soldiers who should have been dead in days lived for weeks. Some, against all predictions, recovered. A broken spinal node realigned enough to let one officer walk with assistance. A nerve-blasted pilot regained partial motor control. None of this made sense to the Empire's physicians, who adhered to a diagnostic system that marked these cases as statistically non-viable. Her quarters were still a rust-stained cell. Her rations remained half portions, but eyes began to turn, not with admiration, at first with suspicion. Rumors spread in hushed frequencies. The human was tampered with reports, using forbidden tech, committing unauthorized procedures. Audits found nothing. She worked with what little they gave her, used their own tools. The only variable they couldn't control was her. She refused to break, not because of pride, but because she had seen suffering. Not theoretical numbers or clinical simulations, but real, desperate agony. And she knew something the Empire didn't. Healing wasn't about superiority or procedure. It was about presence, listening, touch, sacrifice. They had meant to bury her among the forgotten, but slowly, quietly, without a word of protest, Mara Ellison was becoming something far more dangerous than a prisoner. She was becoming necessary. They moved her without ceremony. No explanation, no commendation, just a transfer to the ward no one wanted. The hopeless ward. It was where they sent the Empire's failures. Soldiers beyond saving, bodies too broken for even experimental treatments. To the Korthale, it was a place for quiet exploration, not recovery. Mara knew immediately what this was. A test, or maybe a trap. Either way, she didn't flinch. The ward was silent, not from peace but abandonment. Machines hummed without purpose. Automated charts scrolled lifespans in their final moments. She began her rounds without instruction. A soldier with severe plasma burns had been sedated for weeks. The machine said his neural functions were fading. Mara ignored the readings. She spoke to him gently, touched his hand, replaced crusted bandages with clean cloth soaked in antiseptic gel. Within days, brain activity spiked. Within weeks, he opened his eyes. They noticed. At first, it was silent surveillance. Junior physicians watched from behind tinted glass. They noted her behaviors, but couldn't replicate the results. They mimicked her hand movements, her timing, her medication doses. Nothing worked. Because they missed what mattered, she connected with the patients. They weren't just bodies to her. They were people. One soldier, paralyzed from a spine fracture, wept uncontrollably in his sleep. Something the Corthale believed impossible. Mara sat beside him each night, whispering soft reassurances, singing lullabies from a language none of them understood. The patient's vitals stabilized. Neural pathways showed activity. Eventually, he moved a finger. The Empire's physicians argued over terms, unquantifiable variables, anomalous human effect. No one wanted to admit what was clear. Her presence changed outcomes. They called it luck, then coincidence, then emergent therapeutic response. But they couldn't explain why only she achieved these results. When the son of a high-born admiral suffered neurological trauma from a failed jump drive escape, every Corthale specialist failed. He convulsed endlessly, skin turning pale with degeneration. The medical cast advised ending life support. Desperate and politically cornered, the admiral authorized the unthinkable. Let the human try. Mara entered the chamber with nothing but her hands and voice. She adjusted the room's light, filtered the ambient sounds, and sat beside him. For 5 hours, she remained whispering, touching pressure points, guiding breath, monitoring without machines. When she emerged, the convulsions had stopped. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady. He slept. Word traveled like plasma fire. They still wouldn't say her name, not publicly, but behind closed doors, in the data streams and council channels, she had won, the human healer. No longer just a prisoner, not yet a peer, but something in between, an anomaly they couldn't control, discredit, or explain. Mara didn't celebrate. She didn't demand better quarters or privileges. She returned to the hopeless ward and resumed her work. She knew what they didn't. Healing wasn't about domination. It was about surrender, about choosing to care even when no one else would. In a world of sterile calculation, her humanity wasn't weakness. It was power. The whispers became arguments. The Council of Healing convened in urgency, not over a plague or battlefield epidemic, but because of a human prisoner. The Empire's most sacred traditions were under threat, not from weapons, but from hands that healed too well. Some called for her termination. Others demanded study. A rare few, the ones who'd seen her work firsthand, began to ask a different question. What if she was right? They summoned her, not with honor, but necessity. The Royal Medical Guild, a chamber of beings who had never known failure, stood in a cold semicircle as Mara was brought forward. She wasn't given a translator, a podium, or protocol. Just one instruction: explain your methods. She did, without fear, without embellishment. She spoke of trauma, the kind that couldn't be scanned, of wounds that went deeper than tissue. She described what Earth had taught her, not from books but war. She spoke of silence after explosions, the cold of blood loss, the look in someone's eyes when they knew it was over, and how sometimes, even then, it wasn't. They laughed. Not all, but enough. Emotions were primitive, they insisted. Illogical. Healing required sterilization, not sentiment. But behind her, one of the Empire's diagnostic AIs had been recording patient survival rates across wards. When her numbers were revealed, outpacing even automated triage units, no one laughed again. Still, not everyone accepted the truth. Traditionalists claimed she was manipulating variables, that humans had a latent biochemical pheromone advantage. Some tried to ban her from further treatment altogether, but their own patients began requesting her by designation. Not just soldiers, officers, diplomats, heirs. Permission was granted, quietly, for her to teach a controlled cohort. For Corthale students, chosen for their high tolerance for behavioral anomalies, they expected mimicry. What they got was challenge. Mara didn't teach techniques. She taught observation, stillness, how to ask a question and actually wait for an answer. She taught them to speak gently, to sit beside the dying, to offer a hand not as a procedure, but as a presence. They failed often. But one day, a young healer placed a clawed hand on a trembling patient's shoulder and said nothing at all. The heart rate slowed. The patient slept. Then came the backlash. A faction of military purists accused her of contaminating the Empire's purity. Anonymous messages called her dangerous. One morning, she collapsed in her ward, a slow-acting poison having entered her system. She survived. Barely. They offered her sanctuary, a place to hide. She refused. "If healing stops because I'm afraid, then it was never healing to begin with," she said. The attempt on her life backfired. Overnight, public opinion shifted. A being many had never seen, never heard, had chosen to risk death just to care for those the Empire itself had abandoned. They began to see what she truly was, not a threat, not a curiosity, but the beginning of something they had forgotten how to imagine. A healer, not by function, but by choice. And that, more than any medicine, was changing everything. The Emperor summoned her, not a representative, not a lesser authority. The supreme voice of the Korthale Empire himself. No prisoner, no human, had ever stood in the imperial sanctum. Yet here she was, clad in a simple gray tunic, flanked by guards who no longer watched her with contempt, but caution. She was no longer invisible. She was unpredictable. He asked her only one question: "Why do you continue?" Mara didn't hesitate. Because pain is not a punishment, and healing is not a reward. Every being deserves to be seen, even if only once in their life. The silence that followed was long, heavy with weight she refused to carry. The Emperor, silent for a moment longer, did not argue. He simply gestured to his left. A terminal activated, revealing a transmission intercepted 2 days prior, an outbreak on a fringe world. A bioweapon, one the Korthale didn't recognize. Its effects were chaotic, cross-species, unpredictable. Their medics were dying just from exposure. He offered her a choice: go there or return to her ward. She chose the outbreak, not out of heroism, but out of instinct. This was what she did. She didn't go alone. 3 of the students she had trained volunteered. A 4th had died, killed in a political bombing meant to stop her influence. On the world's scorched surface, among the gasping and the infected, her methods were tested in full. Machines failed. Protocols collapsed. Only intuition, adaptation, and trust remained. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat more than ration cubes. She walked among the afflicted, using her gloved hands where others used drones. She spoke their names, even when she didn't know the language. She looked in their eyes, and they lived. The recovery rate stunned the Empire. Not because she cured the disease, she didn't, but she bought time, stabilized the worst, gave others a window to develop treatment. Without her, the world would have burned. When she returned, she wasn't met with cheers or a parade. The Empire did not know how to celebrate, but her prison record was erased. Her designation updated. She was no longer prisoner 87B. She was Healer Mara of Terra, a title spoken with hesitation at first, then respect. Her teachings were slowly introduced into training programs, not by decree but demand. Soldiers who had once feared her now requested her students. Wards that once only held the dying began to see recovery. The hopeless ward received new funding. And in quiet rooms, the phrase human method no longer meant primitive. It meant something different, something sacred. Mara never asked for power. She never wanted revenge. She only wanted the dying not to die alone. In doing so, she altered the nature of care across an empire built on conquest. Empires rarely change from force, but sometimes, rarely, they change from a whisper, from a hand held in silence, from the courage to heal in a place that never asked to be healed. And so the galaxy would remember, the Empire's most respected healer had once been a human prisoner, and her strength was not in how she fought, but in how she refused to stop caring.